Hi everybody and welcome to This Day in History. This is when the Scott Show looks at what happened on this day in history, February 18th. It's Sunday, February 18th. It's the 49th day of the year already. That's just craziness. Alright, so we're going to start in 1478. George, the Duke of Clarence, is convicted of treason against his older brother, Edward IV of England. He's executed in private in the Tower of London. In 1637, the 80 Years' War on the coast of Cornwall, England, a Spanish fleet intercepts an important Anglo-Dutch convoy of 44 vessels, escorted by 6 warships, destroying and capturing 20 of them. In 1781, the Fourth Anglo-Dutch War, Captain Shirley begins his expedition against Dutch colonial outposts on the Gold Coast of Africa, where Guyana would be today. In 1791, Congress passes a law admitting the state of Vermont into the Union, effective March 4th, 1791. After that state has existed for 14 years as a largely independent, unrecognized state. In 1797, the French Revolutionary War, Sir Ralph Abercrombie and a fleet of 18 ships invade Trinidad. In 1861, Montgomery, Alabama, Jefferson Davis is inaugurated as the President of the Confederate States of America. Also in 1861, same time, with Italian unification almost complete, Victor Emmanuel of Piedmont, Savoy, and Sardinia assumes the title of King of Italy. In 1865, in the Civil War, Union forces under Major General Sherman set the South Carolina State House on fire during the burning of Columbia. 1878, John Tustall is murdered by outlaw Jesse Evans, sparking the Lincoln County War in Lincoln County, New Mexico. There's a very interesting one in 1885. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain is published in the United States. It's very interesting because the city in which I live, and it's gone national, has taken that book out of the required reading for kids now. In the Second Boer War in 1900, Imperial forces suffered the worst single-day loss of life on Bloody Sunday. Then in 1906, Edward Leveille forms the Belgian Olympic Committee in Brussels. In 1930, while taking photographs in January, Clyde Tombaugh discovers Pluto. Also in 1930, Elm Farm Ellie becomes the first cow to fly in a fixed-wing aircraft, and also the first cow to be milked in an aircraft. So if you wanted to know that, there you go. That's important stuff right there. Alright, in 1938, during the Nanking Massacre, the Nanking Safety Zone International Committee is named the Rescue Committee, and the safety zone in place for refugees falls apart in the Sino-Japanese War, 1938. 1942, World War II. The Imperial Japanese Army begins a systematic extermination of perceived hostile elements among the Chinese in Singapore. 1943, the Nazis arrest the members of the White Rose movement. And I am not familiar with that as much as I should be, so I'm going to Google this. The White Rose movement was a non-violent intellectual resistance group in Nazi Germany, led by a group of students and a professor from the University of Munich. Very interesting, and definitely worth reading. 1943, Joseph Goebbels delivers his Sportplatz speech. In 1947, the First Indochina War, the French gained complete control of Hanoi after forcing the Viet Minh to withdraw to the mountains. 1954, the first Church of Scientology is established in Los Angeles. In 1955, Operation Teapot test shot WASP is successfully detonated in the Nevada test site with a yield of 1.2 kilotons. WASP is the first of 14 shots in the Teapot series. In 1957, also, Walter James Bolton becomes the last person legally executed in New Zealand. In 1965, the Gambia becomes independent from the United Kingdom. 1970, the Chicago 7 is found not guilty for conspiring to elicit riots at the 1968 Democratic Convention. 1972, California Supreme Court in the case of People v. Anderson invalidates the state's death penalty and commutes the sentences of all death row inmates to life imprisonment. Now, at this time, 1972, Charles Manson and his followers were already sentenced to death, and they were changed to life in prison. 1977, the test vehicle for the Space Shuttle Enterprise is carried on its maiden flight on the top of a Boeing 747. 1979, Richard Petty then wins a record 6 Daytona 500. This day, 1979. 1991, the IRA bombs early morning in the Paddington and Victoria Station in London. 2001, Robert Hansen is arrested for spying on the Soviet Union. He was an FBI agent. He was ultimately convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. 2001, 7-time champion series, Sprint Cup Series, Dale Earnhardt dies in an accident in the Daytona 500. In 2010, WikiLeaks publishes first of thousands of classified documents enclosed by a soldier now known as Chelsea Manning. 2013, armed robbers steal a haul of diamonds worth $50 million during a raid in Brussels airport in Belgium. And at least 76 people are killed and hundreds injured in a clash between riot police and demonstrators in the Ukraine. So those are that day in history. By the way, that last one was in 2014. That was all the events that happened this day in history. We got some births to talk about, some happy birthdays to send out today. Like Mary the First of England, who was born in 1516. So happy birthday to Mary the First. That's, a lot of times I pay attention to kings, queens, popes, stuff like that. Charles Schwab was born this day in history, 1862. Queenie Leonard, I just think that's a cool name. Born 1905. Jack Palance was born this day in history as well. Bill Cullen, who was a panelist and host of a lot of game shows as I was growing up. So he was born also on this day in history. Halleck K. Vance, who was born this day in history, 1925, is the oldest person here with a Wikipedia page. So happy birthday to Halid. That's awesome. So we also have Johnny Hart, who was a cartoonist, co-created The Wizard of Id, was born this day in history, 1931. So happy birthday to Johnny. Yoko Ono it's her birthday today. Bobby Hart. Judy Rankin, it is her birthday today. And Cristina Ferrare, born 1950. Definitely does not look like she was born in 1950. Sybil Shepherd, she dated Elvis, and it is her birthday today. John Hughes, very famous actor or very famous director, producer. A lot of the 80s films that we are so very used to. Dennis DeYoung of Styx, happy birthday to Dennis. Now John Travolta, Vanna White's birthday today, born 1957. On freaking believable, if I do say so myself. Matt Dillon's birthday today. Dr. Dre. Happy birthday to Dr. Dre. Molly Ringwald's birthday today. James Fowler, it's his birthday today as well. Julia Butterfly Hill. And Jillian Michaels. It's Jillian's birthday today as well. Lots of really cool people were born this day in history. And so, with that, we will close this day in history. And we will go to just a few deaths to talk about. Pope Gregory V died 999. It's not just a cool number. Billy Murdoch died this day in history in 1911. Of course, you guys know we talked about Earnhardt already. Mildred Burke died this day in history. One of the most amazing women wrestlers of all time, and somebody that stood the test of time for a lot of things. Also, Ivan Koloff died this day in history, and Maria von Trapp, who I believe, if I'm going to get all of this right, she was the second oldest daughter of George von Trapp, who was the captain. And she was Louisa in the movie. That was the character that she was played. She was the last surviving sibling portrayed in the film The Sound of Music. So there you go. It is National Democracy Day in Nepal. It is Dialect Day in Japan, Independence Day in Gambia, and Turkish Students' Union Day in Iraqi Turkestan. And there you go, folks. That is this date in history. Thank you guys so very much. And we'll catch you here real soon on the ScottShow.com.